Welcome aboard the WorkplaceWhiz, your audio gateway to the modern workplace. We have designed this podcast as the place to discuss strategies, best practices, and share industry insights with our expert guests. This program is brought to you by Yarooms, the workplace experience platform. I'm Cosmin Patlageanu, marketing professional and published author. In this episode, we dive deep into the evolving dynamics of the workplace. So let's talk politics. We are tackling a controversial shift in corporate office around the world, the push from remote to in office work. And as companies such as Dell or IBM and other giants in tech and law enforce a return to office mandate, what does this mean for the landscape of work in terms of employee satisfaction and company culture? We have gathered the insights from business leaders and experts to explore the future of work in this new normal. Today, we are joined by two seasoned professionals, Kristie Jones and Kyriakos Sidiropoulos. Kristie Jones is our go-to expert for software as a service companies wanting to build or scale their sales teams. Her 20 plus years of as a sales leader in the tech space fuel her passion for helping bootstrapped or VC-backed founders increase revenue through improved strategy, process, and people. Kyriakos Sidiropoulos is an IT professional with over 2 decades of experience in digital transformation. He holds degrees in computer science and project management, a professional certification in management, and executive MBA. And his interests include corporate strategy, Lean Six Sigma, DevOps, and empowerment. Kristie, Kyriakos, welcome.
Cosmin, thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So, to set the stage a little bit, now, according to the media, in May, Dell will implement a policy change, making fully remote employees ineligible for promotions, which is obviously a significant shift from its previous supportive stance on remote work. The company will categorize most employees as either remote or hybrid, with hybrid workers required to be in the office about 3 times a week. Now, according to Business Insider, those opting for a fully remote setup will not be considered for promotion or role changes. IBM also recently sent a message to managers saying that they must be on site at an office or client location at least 3 days a week, otherwise, leave the company, regardless of where they may have moved during the pandemic. And this follows the lead of companies such as Google, JP Morgan Chase, and law firms that made it clear to their employees that a return to office mandate is not optional. And in some of the cases, there is a warning about potential consequences for non-compliance. It looks like many companies are heading down this path as well. Now, as the saying goes, out of sight, out of mind, the Wall Street Journal reports that last year, people working from home in the US were 31% less likely to be promoted than office workers. And they were also less likely to receive mentoring. To make matters worse, about 90% of the CEOs admitted that they were more likely to give preference to office workers when it comes to career advancing projects, raising, or promotions. What would be the rationale behind this move? I mean, what are the benefits of promoting office workers over remote employees? Kristie, what's your take?
I think pre-pandemic, everybody felt like collaboration and efficiency was probably more effective for those who were working together in one building on one floor. So I think the impetus is probably back to that. I think there are plenty of studies out there that support that people are getting just as much work done from home as they are when they were in the office. But I think there's a perception that it, more collaborative work, more collaborative work environment, more efficiency. And I think this also speaks to the average age of the CEOs of the organizations that you mentioned.
Could be, yes. So we can't really compare, right, before and after the pandemic because the shift was immediate and everybody kind of adopted the new framework or the new situation. Um, Kyriakos, what's your take on the matter?
Uh, I think that there are definitely benefits and there are also drawbacks. Um, what what it is noticeable is that when you try to perform a certain level of tasks, uh, there are things that need enhanced communication, and there are other things that they need more focus. So there are opportunities for people who are dealing in more tasks that they need focus that they would be able to do this thing from home remotely, where it could be quiet and they could really focus on what they're doing. There are other more collaborative tasks that they could be better enhanced through communication, immediate communication. The reaction times are much faster. So it really depends on the tasks that someone is involved in, I would say.
Absolutely. And I think it's also about the company culture, right? So some of the companies went fully remote. And in those particular cases, there's never going to be a question of who gets promoted or who gets a new role, right? Because everybody's working remotely. So there's not going to be a difference between the people who are in the office and the ones that are working from, wherever, basically. But what I find a little bit intriguing, let's say, is the part about mentoring. So it looks like people who go to the office, so who work from the office more often than not, tend to get more mentoring, and this I think is crucial, right? So, Kristie, you've mentored a lot of people and a lot of teams. Do you see a preference?
I think that's actually true. I do think you're going to be getting more assistance, more mentoring. Cosmin, I have a 24-year-old son, and he went through college during the pandemic and graduated a couple of years ago. He works for Wells Fargo Advisors, so a very large Fortune 500 company here in the States. And they are they're in a hybrid situation in his team. He can work 3 days in the office and 2 days from home, but he has chosen to work 5 days in the office. I think that is a result of the experience he had in college. He did not like remote school whatsoever. And ironically, he came by the house yesterday, and he had just taken on a new role at the organization, and he was in day 4, and day 1 and 2 did not go well. He said he got in a situation where he wasn't able to answer questions from people who needed answers from him. It was very frustrating for him. But what I did hear him say was he was reaching out. He was walking around the office finding help. And yesterday I said, "So how's the new, position going?" And he goes, "Great, like close to mastery." He's a little cocky. And I said, "Really?" And I go, "Already?" And he's like, "Well, yeah." He's like, "I'm a fast learner." But he is a fast learner, but he was also able to seek out subject matter experts that he needed when he needed them just by walking around the office. I think if he had been fully remote at home and he gotten that promotion, that it would have taken him exponentially longer. Like, surely he hasn't mastered everything in 4 days, but on day 1, he sent me a text message that said, "I'm about 18 seconds from quitting." He was super frustrated because he had gotten thrown into a situation where he wasn't fully trained yet. But he literally said, "I literally just walked around and bothered people until people would help me."
True. So, I was thinking when everything went remote, how difficult it must be for newcomers, right? And not necessarily newcomers, but for juniors, really, or
Yep.
for people who are for the first time in that position, because they don't know the company, they don't know who to go to, and they basically have a list of names in an app. And many of those people would have like a cross there saying, "Do not dare to disturb me at this particular moment in time because I'm focusing on something," right?
Right.
So if you're in an office, like in a classic in-office situation, then you have probably more space. You can go ask people who to ask for, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, Kyriakos, I saw you nodding at some point here, and do you agree?
Everything that Kristie says resonates with me, makes total sense. Uh, and even if we think of the sense of professional environment, it does have a meaning, it's an environment where you don't have to think about other things, just about the work. It contains all the things that they're necessary for you to perform a good job. Your colleagues are there. If something goes wrong with your equipment, there's someone else there to help you with. There's even coffee there, water, everything you need in order to perform the job to maximum and learn as much as possible to help your company achieve its goals. So it's a win-win situation. I understand again that remote is very good. I can help in a lot of situations, but in the context that we are talking about newcomers, I think it's indispensable the time to spend at the office and learn a lot from your colleagues.
On the other hand, you can focus really well when you're on your own, working remotely for some place, right? And you have everything there, and nobody's gonna bother you for a while. Technology kind of allows you to communicate with the others. Um, I'm also, I like getting in the office from time to time, and meeting my team, and there is a different vibe. I'm more in favor of a hybrid sort of situation, but starting from this point, uh, is it a matter of perception really? So people who are coming to the office more often, are they perceived as being more involved or more proactive? What do you think?
I'm afraid it might be based on the information you shared at the top of our podcast that there's a perception of loyalty and dedication. When they're saying that you not that you wouldn't even be considered, like, you won't be considered at all for promotion versus, you know like people who are in the office more regularly will be given preferential treatment. Even they didn't even say that, right? They just said you're not going to be eligible. So the message that's being sent is, we don't think if you're not in the office that you don't have the same level of loyalty or dedication that those who are coming into the office. And I think that's a scary proposition. I don't think that's an accurate assumption at all. I think people can be, very loyal and very dedicated, and not, and again, for a variety of reasons, family reasons, commutes, long commutes. There's a lot of reasons why it's inefficient or not in someone's best interest to come into the office. So I think that seems like there's like those are very, very large, Fortune 50 companies that you mentioned. That's a big leap, right? To make that type of assumption, and to put everybody under one blanket, right? I mean, that's just sort of a one size doesn't fit all assumption. So I think it's a very dangerous precedent.
I'm going.
Absolutely. And yes, please. Yeah.
I was going to add to that that um, the companies, very big companies, are also trying to experiment. I would say they're testing the waters with all these policies that they're bringing out. I I wouldn't really read either too much or too little into that. Maybe they're just reflects the situation as it is right now, because we have gone through the COVID phase where everybody was remote. Before that, everybody was at the office. Now we have gone through a hybrid phase. And I think that the companies are, instead of people finding out who's going to be getting promotions, who's not going to be getting promotions, and so on, maybe they're trying a bit of a experiment to see, does that work? Is that something acceptable? How many of our employees would actually be okay with that, and how many would they not be okay? So just putting a small paragraph there, please, Cosmin.
That's an interesting position. So I remember reading one of your articles, and you were looking into the future a little bit and saying, at some point there's going to be a sort of a benefit having your office, right, and going back to the office. You were imagining it's somehow like at some point the offices will downsize and it will only be like for some, not for everybody. So the majority of people would be rather working remotely or hybrid, and it was just for some. Do you think that's still valid? Is it still a possibility?
I thought this is a prediction I've made based on what we have been experiencing. I think it's a possible option that companies would really want to invest more in people that they go to the office and they have this sense of loyalty to the company and to the corporate culture, than to people that they just want to have a job, but maybe they're not so into the company, or something is, or they're doing some work that is not the most crucial work that our strategic purpose. I think that it is a possibility that companies will focus more on positions that they mean a lot to them and they're quite strategic than positions that someone can work from home, but maybe it's not so important for them from strategic point of view again.
Absolutely. Thinking of performance, even so, obviously some of the roles would be essential and strategic, but we got to look at performance for any of our team members, right? And no matter the way we decide to work, even if it's hybrid or on premises, we have some KPIs, right? We monitor performance, and some advocate that working from home or working from a remote in a remote setting is at least as productive as working from the office. What's your take on that?
I agree. I mean, I think I'm someone who really, I mean, I've been working from home, out of my home office, if you will, for 8 years since I started my consulting business. But but pre-pandemic, I was on site a lot. But I don't feel like I'm any more or less productive. I'm probably more productive at home because I have less distractions. When I'm working in a client site, people, because they don't see me very often because normally remote, they'll pop in and want to chat, right? Which is great. I mean, again, to the conversation we had earlier, for sure, this has to do with building culture, right? Building community within the organization. I do think for sure that that's harder. But from an efficiency standpoint, I think we talked about like different roles, but if you're an individual contributor that really doesn't need a lot of other people to complete your tasks, then I think you can be extremely efficient working at home. If you're relying on other people, one of the things that does frustrate me, because I'm a big Slack user, most of my clients are on Slack, but I am one of those people that wants an immediate answer when I have a question. And so I would have been one of those people who would have walked down the hall to get it in the past. And now I have to wait, like you said, patiently on Slack. Or again, I have some European clients, so until somebody wakes up in the morning to answer my question. So I think from that standpoint, there's probably, if you need help and you need answers, in some cases, that's probably less efficient. But knowing that I walked down the hall, I interrupted somebody else's work, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Kyriakos, I was thinking about us actually because uh, we have been working for quite a while. We are not newcomers, right? So for us, it's kind of going back to the old ways, in a sense. But looking at how Kristie put it in perspective, so for the past 8 years, even before pandemic, so it had nothing to do with that. It had something to do with the change in the way she decided to work. For many of us, it's been not a decision, but it's like a context sort of result. Um, what's your take on that? Is it something that's more appropriate for I don't know, for professionals with a solid background, or for the newcomers? Should it be a difference? I mean, should we allow professionals to have more leeway and more flexibility and be more strict with the newcomers, with the juniors? What's your take on that?
On what level are we talking about? KPIs or on
Not necessarily. So flexibility mostly in a sense of them deciding where to work from.
someone who's a newcomer? Again, it has to do with the culture of the company, and the company serves its shareholders, its clients, the environment. It's the whole ecosystem. So what do we want for our newcomers to experience, and to how do we want them to perform? It will also go. It's also important for the manager, the immediate manager of the person, to know what they want and what is the instructions they have received from higher management. For me, it would make sense to discuss always with the new colleagues. It's very important to have at least some days face-to-face communication where they can express much easier what they need to say to you and how they want to navigate within the working environment, and then discuss with them if they, and I would say that a manager knows also if a position is better filled remotely, hybrid, or at the office. So they can discuss with the newcomer, which they would probably have engaged, and discuss with them what would be the best solution to move forward. I think this is also something that is being explained potentially at the level of the interview, so there are no mismatches in the expectations. Yeah, it depends. It really depends.
Cosmin, as
I think
someone who
we
works
should.
with sales teams exclusively for the
Yeah.
most part, I would love for the newbies, as I call them, to be in the office. And we're missing a lot from a sales perspective because a lot of what we do as sales leaders is coaching. And when their cubicles were outside of my office, I was managing by listening, overhearing, right? And I could walk out after a call ended and give immediate coaching. We have software and tools for that now, but now I have to make a conscious effort to go in and listen to a recorded call or ask, an employee to send me a recorded call so that I can do call coaching and call monitoring of that. And I do think it's taking longer to get particularly like SDRs and BDRs who are most likely right out of college. I think it's taking them longer to get up and running. It's much harder for me to onboard somebody who's not been in sales before or is a junior remotely than it is by, I used to call it management by walking around, right? Particularly in my world, I could literally just kind of walk around the QBs, hear what's going on, and give immediate feedback when someone hung up the phone. And now it could take 2 or 3 days for me to listen to that same call that I would have just caught on the fly as I was headed to the bathroom. Now I'm consciously having to go over that. So I think in some cases it is putting our our younger and newer employees at a disadvantage.
Absolutely. So I was just thinking about that particular case, right? When you have a new SDR, for instance, you need to have the tech in place first of all. So you need to have the technology to allow you to go through those recordings, and then you need to set up some time so you can go through them. And also, I think it was so prior to going remotely, the SDR would have been among its peers, right? So
That's correct.
it wouldn't have been just you, the manager. It would have been
Right.
his peers who would say, "Hey, I've encountered that sort of situation before, and the best way to address it is this," or "I know that objection. This would be a fantastic way to go around it." So it wouldn't be just the help that they get from the manager; it would be from the crowd as well. And in terms of calling or reaching out, so I remember I had this assistant. I used to work in a PR firm, and she would hate cold calling, right? Calling people she didn't know. And I gave her a list of people to make sure that they get on an event, right? So she needed to call basically everyone on the list. She didn't personally know anyone, and she had to call 30 people and ask them if they join the event, just make sure, validate everything. And she hated me for that, and she eventually told me, said that I hated you so much that day, when you put me through that list. But then, so it became easier, and now it's something that I do every day, and I don't even think about it. It's like second nature. But I would have never done it unless I had to. And I was just thinking, if the setting would have been similar, she might have said nobody answered. But because she
Right.
was there next to me, right, said I couldn't get through. I mean, everybody was busy. I don't know. I don't know who's going to attend the event or not. So that would have been a potential outcome. But since we were I was just sitting next to her, there was no way around it. Right.
Well, I like what you said about the coworkers too, because I used to call it high five over the QB. Sales is a high rejection sport. It's really hard. And there's a lot more rejection than there is wins, a lot more losses than wins. And so, for sure overhearing, again, I do think because people were overhearing their coworkers that they were new about how they handled situations. But also when they book the appointment, like the high five, right? Immediate reward, immediate praise. And sometimes it could take hours for someone to, for an SDR manager to realize that a meeting was booked when they're busy doing other things or locked into their computer. So I think, yeah, I think it's really hard. Particularly, there's certain departments I think it's harder than others. I think sales is one of those departments where being in there's so many advantages to being together.
Absolutely, absolutely, and just going further with that. So I would imagine if you're in the financial department or something, so you need more like focus time. You look at the numbers. You don't need that much of an interaction. But then again, it's a different type of person eventually, right? So in our department, for instance, when something is time sensitive and you need something to go out to print like now,
Yeah.
waiting for the dots to dance on Slack or whatever until you get an answer, or it's like, can you give me that go ahead, please? Or is that okay? The colors are right. So, and you imagine, in marketing, for instance, we have other sorts of difficulties. So we have three monitors, they will show three different colors if they're not calibrated in the same way. So then eventually when we print something, it should have been like a nice purple, it gets bluish or whatever. And it's like, okay, so who messed it up? Who of the three who actually played with the file messed up the colors? So you can go back and figure it out. But if you're in the same office and just look at it and say, yeah, it's good to go, or no, it's too bluish, right? So different sort of challenges, let's call them, depending on the department. Um, Now, on another perspective, people who have been even moving homes during the pandemic, right? So they decide to go to countryside or upstate or in a different state, in your case, Kristie. Um, Many have done so for financial reasons as well. Maybe it was cheaper to move someplace else,
Yeah.
or they wanted to live near the forest or the lake or whatever.
Yep.
And there was a lot of chatter saying that if you've moved away from New York, then you shouldn't get the New York pay. So, is it something that you've encountered, or discussions on salaries?
Yeah, as someone who does a lot of hiring for their clients, this comes up a lot. And I think over time it's normalized. So I think initially, pre-pandemic, if somebody was in the New York office versus the, Cleveland, Ohio office, they would be making more money, right? Cost of living was higher. We would have made an adjustment for that. But now we're not doing that because majority of the clients that I work for are hiring remote employees for the most part. Although I have one I'm hiring for currently who would prefer, he's in Nashville, and he would prefer they be close to him so they could come in and meet with him in person on a regular basis. But we are no longer adjusting base salary based on location because so many people, to your point, Cosmin, have decided it's a choice, right? They've chosen to leave the big city and go somewhere where it's more economical to live or smaller or quieter. And so I'm no longer making cost of living adjustments like I used to just 3 or 4 years ago.
But when you have somebody already on your team and they decide to move, is there ever a question of changing the salary?
No, I haven't really had that situation happen. I know that it's been a discussion point for certain companies, but I have not run across that myself. I think my stance on that would be, again, I'm never advocating for taking money away from anybody. I think that's a horrible morale decision, and there's lots of bad implications of doing that. Um, so no, I haven't had that happen, but I have lots of clients who actually are in big cities, Boston and New York. And but by and large, some of those will tell me they don't want anybody on the West Coast or Mountain, and that's just for strictly a time zone situation. I think that's something we haven't talked about yet, but I have plenty of companies who are on the East Coast or in Europe. My European clients, the same thing. They would prefer somebody be on the East Coast, but even my US based companies would prefer not to have to deal with the 3 hour time zone between the West Coast and the East Coast. They find that that's going to be disruptive to efficient work.
Absolutely. So, Kyriakos, do we see this happening in Europe as well?
Um, I don't think we have so much changes in salaries because it's not really fair. We do have people that they can be working remotely from different countries in Europe where the taxes are different and the cost of living would be different. and maybe companies sometimes they would try to hire people from the same country, thus paying less money. For example, if you live in Luxembourg compared to Greece, the cost of living here in Luxembourg is much higher than in Greece. Okay, so if you would send someone from here to Greece, then they would have to pay the taxes in Greece, and for more than if someone is working more than 6 months abroad, then the taxes are different. They belong to another country. So based on that, you could have a difference in your net income, and the company might need to adjust the salary. So it's not something that they would do on purpose to relocate someone just for that. But if they would have some colleagues that they do that, then potentially they could be realigning the salaries to the country.
Absolutely, yeah. In Europe, we have different sort of regulations,
Yes.
as you mentioned. So if you're working from a different state for a longer while, then you need to pay some taxes locally as well.
Yes.
But I was just more curious from the other perspective that whenever you're doing the hiring, you're looking, you're living in this city, so basically I could offer you less than. Is it something that you've encountered?
No, because it has to do with the competitiveness of the employee you're trying to engage. So of course you would want, and companies always want the best talent. There is a talent war going on, of course, and they would be looking to engage someone that is going to bring value to the company. So they wouldn't really be thinking so much on the salary than the added value that this person is going to have. Always compared with the expectations of the salary.
I like that. I like that a lot. Now, going back a little to the difference in working styles. So we have, on one hand side, we have people working from the office, and we have the remote workers. Is there a difference in terms of bonuses or rewards that you've noticed? Do people working from the office tend to be more visible, and then, as a consequence, get to I don't know, be rewarded as such?
I'm not seeing that. I'm really not seeing that. I do think, regardless of the massive policies that you'd mentioned, I do think that there is a little bit of out of sight, out of mind, so to speak. But if I go back to using my child as an example, his boss is actually in Virginia. So he works here in St. Louis, but his direct supervisor is in Virginia. Her boss sits down the hall from my child. So like, he's in a remote situation. There's only two offices that even though they're required to be hybrid, there are two offices that have his team. And so he literally, after 16 months, just met his boss for the first time this week. She came in for the week, and he had never met her before. And he texted me and said, "She's 6 feet tall." He didn't even know how tall she was. He was shocked. He was like, "She's
That's
6
funny.
feet tall." He said she should have been playing for the WNBA. And I thought that was really crazy, right? Like, not only had he never met her, which means she'd never met anybody in the team in St. Louis, but like, he didn't even know how tall she was. I didn't even know what she physically looked like, because they were seeing each other over Teams, right? But I think about that situation because I don't think that people in the office that I've seen are getting conscious preferential treatment, but they might be getting unconscious bias, right? I think unconscious bias may come in. And the fact that my son's boss's boss literally sits like near him, she's probably sharing information, because if she's managing by walking around, she probably has an opinion about what he's doing. And she may actually be influencing his boss, who, had never been in the office until just this week.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Kyriakos, do we see this happening? A bias potentially, or a more institutionalized sort of policy?
Right. To be honest, I don't have anybody who's working 100% remotely. At least in Luxembourg, people are expected to come to the office 3 times or 2 times a week. Because Luxembourg is a very small country, we have a lot of employees that they live in France or Belgium or Germany, which is, it's a country collaboration, let's say. So And because we do have here this thing with the taxes, the people that they live abroad, they have to come to the Luxembourgish offices. So I don't have anybody who's working remotely, 100%. I could just make a perception, I could just say how I perceive things. I think that it would have been a bias, as Kristie says, because someone who's 100% remotely, I think that you need to have very good processes in place in order to monitor the quality and quantity of work being produced. And then this is just one part, because you also need to have good collaboration with your colleagues and communication. So how do you monitor that? So it's not so easy, I would assume, to completely evaluate the performance of someone who's 100% remote. That's my opinion.
Absolutely. I was thinking though, so I'm glad this some of the questions turned actually into a sort of a myth busting situation, because I didn't like those assumptions, to be very frank. Having like two-tier people, the ones here, the ones over there. I don't think it really works. I mean, you either decide that you have everybody hybrid or everybody remote, because otherwise biases will be there, right? But what I'm thinking is, since some of the companies mandate a return to work, couldn't they just use some rewards and some bonuses to actually bring people back? Wouldn't that be an incentive, rather than saying, if you're not coming to the office 3 days a week, I'm going, our contract is done?
Yeah, I don't like the punitive nature of that at all, right? I mean, I think that damages morale, that damages culture. So I don't like the punitive nature of that at all. Like I said, you could go as far as to say those who are in the office are going to get preferential treatment when promotions come up, which doesn't exclude people. I just don't like the punitive nature of those statements at all. I just don't. That's not a company I would want to work for.
I'm going to say that since at least I'm not working for one of these companies that they have expressed their strategy in this way, uh, I don't know if this is exactly how it is, or this is how. So this is something that has been portrayed in the media as such. I agree with Kristie. This the way it has come out is a bit punitive, and of course, everybody would, or most of the people would be a bit resistant to that, because nobody wants to be punished for working. Uh, I can understand from company perspective that there are going to be these differences in rewards. Someone who's always there, based on everything that we have talked so far, is going to have a bit more advantage, because they communicate more directly with the people that they're with them, and they might have more information than someone who's completely remotely. So I can see that potentially a reward would be based on merit rather than punitive, because they're there. And even if you're not there 100%, you're there 60%. The results are going to be much more evident than someone who's not.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking, of course, it could be media portraying things in a different manner, or emphasizing some of the discussion points. However, when companies do that, when they actually mandate a return to work, one of their arguments is essentially that people lose touch with the company culture. And this is something that we've heard a number of times. You've also mentioned loyalty earlier on. Does it have anything to do with being physically in the office, you think?
I don't. I don't think loyalty has anything to do with your proximity or location. To me, that's a trait. By the way, that's a character trait, and so I think those are like you're born with those. You establish those by an early age, whether or not you're a loyal person or not. So I think one has not. I don't think that where you're working has nothing to do with your level of loyalty or dedication, for that matter. I just don't think you can make that big a leap.
from my perspective, I think that the fact that we are asking, or we're discussing about people being remote 100%, considering that we as humans, we create bonds, and we do create physical bonds, and we do that throughout our life. It's not like we're just doing it once. We do it with our family, we do it with our education system, we do it with our leisure time. Every time we do form bonds, and this brings people together. And I think that for me, first you create some type of loyalty and trust between your friends, and this can be your colleagues as well, and then to a higher level to a company that you work for. But if you do communicate uh, a lot with your colleagues, then you can form some type of bond that can translate to loyalty, because you like the people that you're working with, your teams. You have you're part of the team, and you want to help them, and they want to help you. And in case something goes wrong, they are gonna be always there to help in any situation. And for me, the loyalty has to come first to the people that you work with, and then it will extend to the company that you are working for. So that's how I would perceive loyalty.
Absolutely. Sometimes I'm wondering if it isn't actually too much for a company to expect loyalty from someone. So we do have a contract, and for some it's enough, and they say, I'm just doing whatever it's in my contract. But on the other hand, there is also this perception that if people are working remotely, they might be doing something else. They might have like multiple contracts. They might be working for some other companies as well during the time that they should be working for me, right? Do you think this is something that managers or companies fear, and as a result, they push for a return to work?
I mean, yeah. I mean, it happened, right? I mean, it happened during pandemic. Developers were doing it, SDRs were doing it, some salespeople were doing it, working multiple jobs. I'm not seeing that much anymore. There have been a couple of times in the last year or two where we had some suspicions about that. But to me, I want to hold. It was something that you guys had said earlier, but um, even back when even back 20 years ago, I coined a term that I use with my employees called a player privilege. And so, if you were hitting quota and you were, hitting your KPIs and doing the activities that were being asked of you, and you had a sick child and wanted to work from home, or you wanted to work on vacation a couple of days, that's what I called a player privilege. And we earn the right to do that. And so, when I was a younger manager in my 20s and 30s, I wanted to treat everybody the same. So I thought everybody should be treated equally, and that was fair. Then I realized that not everybody's producing equally, right? Not everybody's contributing to the company's bottom line or top line equally. And so why would we treat everybody equally? And so I think a little bit of that is a player privilege. And in Cosmin, to your point, people are, and again, I'm not sure it's less loyal. Like I would probably have used that term as well. But the average tenure of someone in sales is under 2 years at a company, right? Is that less loyal, or is that more opportunities now than ever before, right? Is that, or is that a company saying it's time to come back into the office, or you have to be in the office 3 days and wanting to remain 5 days in the office? So, I think sometimes we tie loyalty to things that have nothing to do with loyalty. They have to do with other things, including opportunities. I mean, the the remote situation has allowed people to take jobs that they may never ever have had an opportunity to even interview for, because there's no proximity, issues there. And so if you wanted to work for a certain type of company, in a certain state in the United States, because you just loved what was happening in Colorado, right? Like you just, those people are outdoorsy and this type of thing, and I want to work for a company that believes in the environment and that. But I live in New Hampshire, right? I might not be able to find my perfect, passion job, supporting the environment in New Hampshire. So I just think there's a lot of, I think maybe it's less about loyalty and more about opportunities than ever before.
I'm going to say that um, the amount of work someone puts on the company that they work for the company that they work for, it also has to do with how much work they are receiving, how many things they're being asked to do. So maybe it's a good opportunity also for companies to question how they have structured the work that they divide between the people. It's up to middle management to make sure that their employees are doing 8 hours work or 6 hours work. I don't know. And if people are taking side jobs, how can they do that if they have enough work to do for the company that they work for? Where do they get the time? So it is something up to the company to understand and to middle management to be able to monitor the work that it's been assigned and done. Yeah, and if the people have time to take other jobs, then that's something to be discussed. Do we want that? Is that something that's going to hurt us as a company? If my employee does another job that it might not be the culture in my company, am I okay with that? Or am I not? This is going to hurt my reputation or not? So it really depends.
Absolutely. I think the matter of the workload is obviously it's up to every team manager and division, whatever the department is. However, there are always pros and cons, right? So if you're working on a different project as well, then you get to know stuff that you would have probably never would have encountered in your current position. So the exchange you have with different companies might eventually work in your favor. But also, I mean, just judging from an energy level perspective, you might be able to do this for a while, but you can't do this indefinitely because you're going to wear out.
Right.
That's for sure. I mean, if you put the same level of energy in multiple jobs at the same time, you probably can't deliver in the long run for all of them.
So I'm just going to say one thing because that's reminded me that I had read on the internet many years ago of a case where an employee back pro-COVID, an employee in England, if I'm not mistaken, they would work two jobs simultaneously. They would work the morning, they would take a lunch break, then they would go to the other company and they would work the afternoon. And nobody would really notice that this person had two jobs simultaneously. So even if it's not remote, people who want to potentially do this, or they might find a way of doing it. So it was an interesting story.
Absolutely. I mean, creativity is something that many of us have. It kind of depends where you put it to use. You just reminded me. I've read about a case, and there was this guy working as a developer for, I think it was an American company, and he basically outsourced his job to a guy in China,
Yes.
and they would have never guessed that that was the case. But they saw somehow the logs that somebody from China was logging into their systems, like potential threat, and then guys from IT went looking for whatever the reason for that connection, and that's how they discovered actually. And the guy was like, "Yeah, but you're an outsourcing company. You outsource your work. So why shouldn't I? I mean, this is what you do. Why? How come you're upset when I'm doing it?" Right? So it
They
was a
call that
funny.
entrepreneurship.
Yep.
Yeah, very, very. I mean, he had been doing it for a while.
I think
But
this guy got booted, I think, but
yes, he did.
I would have given him a promotion, really, because
Well, it's kind of depends. Yeah.
he did got the award with the company. If we're talking about the same case, he did got the award of best employee of the year.
Oh, geez.
I think he did. Yeah, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I think he did. Now, I have another question on the topic of mandating people back to work. So there is a question of resistance, right? So people get accustomed really quickly to status quo, and especially if it's more in their favor. And here I'm thinking about what Kristie said earlier. When you are a young manager and you are trying to treat everybody kind of the same, um, which would in theory sound like fairness, right? Treating everybody kind of in the same way. But is it fair to actually treat everybody in the same way? I mean, should we treat them based on the level of involvement? Or, you mentioned the A team. I mean, I have a bias for people who are, trying to do a little bit more than what they have been asked to do. Is it fair to kind of have a bias towards the 18 players?
I think it is fair. I think, again, without A players, not all companies would reach their, the top of their pinnacle. So, I mean, I think everybody would love to have. I mean, not every team is full of A players. That's not. I don't think that's a realistic ask. But why wouldn't I want to favor someone who, like you said, goes the extra mile, puts in 110%, contributes more than other people, is a team player, it mentors other members of the team. I think we have a bias towards, we see that as favorable behavior. And I think we reward that, like I said, either consciously or unconsciously. I think for the most part that behavior gets rewarded, and I think it should be rewarded.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. I mean, there is equality. And I was just thinking now that Chris was saying this. There is equality and there is equity, and definitely right. And
Love that. Yeah.
Yep, me too.
yeah, so yeah, someone's going to be working more and is going to be helping me as a manager perform better and give better results to my manager, which will drive the company where they want to go, the business goals. So yeah, of course, I'm going to be working more with them, and yeah, I wouldn't even consider it preferential treatment. I would just consider it normal, because that's sometimes we expect. And if someone likes what they do, they wouldn't really be thinking, I'm doing extra things. No, I do it because I like it, and it's part of who I am. So yeah, I would really like to be working with people like that.
Absolutely, me too. And I was just thinking, you always have the counterparty, the ones that say, yeah, but nowhere in my contract does it say that I gotta go the extra mile, which is true.
That's right.
Which is true. But then again, in terms of having a bias and preferring to work with people that we consider to be A players, doesn't mean we treat the others badly. Because this is, I think, the fallacy. People think that because you're treating the others better, you're treating them poorly. No, you're treating them normally, and you give
Right.
something extra to the A team. And
Right.
I think this is something that, speaking of fallacies, is something that many people don't understand, what they don't want to understand, which is probably unpopular. But businesses are very pragmatic institutions by design. They're not, the main goal is not having equality, if you like. Right. The main goal is having, the prosper business and good results end of the year, and whoever helps more with that should be rewarded more. I mean, it's kind
That's
of,
right.
Yes.
you put a lot of effort in, then you're supposed to get more out of it.
And I'm just going to add that again, I'm just going to say that it is good that we have some objectives and we try to meet this and deliver. It is also part of our daily job, I would say, to help our colleagues. And like this, we can all move higher and better to do a better job. And if you think about it, by us doing a better job, we're going to be having a job in the future, because the company is going to be profitable. So it's a no-brainer that we have to not only do our job, which is important, which is what we're getting paid for, but also be able to be of assistance to our colleagues and help them do their job as well, if possible, well.
Absolutely. So we also have some valuable team players, right? But they have a strong preference for more flexible, more remote sort of situation. So how can we help them? Presumably, if you have an A player on your team, you don't want to lose them, right? and taking into account the fact that we are prone to being more, I don't know, to try to reward them more or offer them more than we offer the others. How can we make sure that they keep the DA status while also working, because everybody kind of wants to go back. Let's get this scenario as a baseline. So we have a mandate to return to the office, but we know somebody on the team, which is an A player, wants to work remotely. How can we actually reconcile?
I think that has to do with the policies, right? I'm a rules girl. So if my boss's boss's boss says that we're coming back to the office, I will advocate, right? I mean, I will advocate for the A player that doesn't want to come back to the office or needs to be in a hybrid situation for whatever reason because they've adjusted their life when we told them it was okay to adjust their life. I'm going to be a big advocate for that. But at the end of the day, the company rules are the company rules, and I'm going to have to enforce those whether I agree or don't agree. At some point, I just you have to put your company hat on, right? And do what's in the best interest of the policy that the company has established.
I'm going to add to that I think that someone who's, let's say, someone who's performing very well in their role, we from management perspective, the company needs to try to keep these people, and they need to see really what motivates them. Giving someone a promotion and saying, you're going to get more responsibilities, or you're going to get more work. I don't know if that would necessarily work for them. It has to do with the discussions that you're going to do with this person, and then they're going to see that you want to work with them, and they need to want to work with you. They need to find the job interesting. So they need to be achieving something. So there are some intrinsic motivators that we need to take into consideration. And it's not all about money, because sometimes the company will try to keep on to an employee, say, I'm going to give you more money, or I'm going to make you a manager. But you don't know if this person is good as a manager. It could be a very good technical person, but not very proficient right now, at least, to manage a team. So we need to see what motivates the person, do their work, and help them with that. That's my take.
Absolutely. And I was just thinking, the football is very popular here, Kristie. So it's like soccer, you call it in the US.
Yes.
And we always have this saying that, if we had like a super good player, it doesn't mean he's going to be like a super good coach, right?
That's right.
And we've seen that happening multiple times. I'm sure you
Agree.
have. Yeah.
Agree.
But we told them it was okay, right, to move and work from anywhere, basically, at some point in time. If now we hit a wall in negotiating, if you like, do you think this actually has become a cultural misfit?
I don't. I mean, again, we gave them permission to do that at the time.
It was necessary. If the companies wanted to continue operating, they need to find solutions. And COVID, no matter all the drawbacks, it had these benefits. We all advanced very fast into fast internet and being able to have secure solutions that we can use from home.
Taking a look at your crystal ball, how's the workplace going to look like in the near future?
My crystal ball's dirty. I think there are going to be two camps, right? I think you're going to see less hybrid and more people falling into one camp or the other, either the office camp or the remote camp.
And I think it's going to create a bit more clarity on the level of the business, where they're going to be I think the companies are going to be able to evaluate better the roles that they have in their company, not the people, the roles that they have in the company, and be able to say, yeah, this role is worth that much, and it can be done in-house or it can be done outside. It could be done remotely. So it's going to give the companies the flexibility to make better investments as well. Because maybe they don't need so much space. Maybe they need a smaller office. Maybe they can transform the office from fully open space to more individual offices and have more, or maybe have more meeting rooms. So I think it's very good the way it is now, and it's going to improve. It just adds more flexibility. Yeah.
Gentlemen,
Absolutely.
I apologize. I have another call I need to get to, but I thought our discussion today was awesome.
I think the same, and I was just about to thank you for your inputs. It was a fabulous discussions, and definitely looking forward to pick it up soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much for joining.